Hello, I wanted to do a video on the role of empathy in our modern day politics and society and where we might be going forward. And I felt it was an interesting topic to discuss. It's something that I've certainly thought about over the years, and as an autistic man raising this, I imagine if somebody hears that, they might feel a bit perplexed given the mythology or the misconception about autism and empathy. But I think that's probably more the reason to have a conversation about the role that plays in society and really in our modern politics. So I was listening to a podcast by Shafraz Mazur, who was the inspiration behind Blinded by the Light, and he was talking around the way in which empathy could be used to really deal with some of the more common challenges that we're facing. And I think that is quite pertinent given that we're dealing with greater polarisation in our society. I mean, Brexit is simply an example of the divides that we have, and how, in a way, instead of talking to each other in quite divisive language, we can begin to try and understand why we're there and break down some of those barriers. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be quite complicated. I think it's just about trying to go out there and have conversations with people, work past your misconceptions, and listening to people's perspectives. I mean, somebody who I suppose could be labelled as disabled, or somebody who's seen as different because I just happen to have a different type of brain, I commonly really make an effort to go out and listen to people, to try and understand different ways that people approach things, to really kind of get an understanding of how things work. And it's usually when you engage in conversation, when you listen to people's experiences, that you begin to realise that the thoughts and perceptions that people put out there are sometimes not true or misunderstood, and how those can really influence the way you think about certain issues. And when I look at some of the more profound problems that we have around homelessness, disabled employment, all sorts of those type of areas, and the way in which stereotyping and misconceptions play a huge role in the way we view those areas and how they can act to justify our non-action or even our action, it really makes me realise that when you listen and have the power either of conversation or just have, open your mind up to the possibility of why somebody's in that situation, how that can not only change your perception, but it can also sometimes motivate you to act. For somebody on the spectrum, a lot of people assume that you don't have any empathy. And that's simply not true. We do have problems, for example, reading social cues or sometimes reading body language, but a lot of us have really strong affective empathy, which is emotional empathy. And I think that drives a lot of us to things like social justice and to get involved in trying to do something about the world. And when you really feel people's pain, you start to understand actually why people might be motivated to act in a certain way, or people might feel in a certain way. And it's important that we break those barriers down and understand it in our own decision making, because if we do, I think we can start to put stuff together and put aspects maybe of our country together that is kind of gone missing. So this is not a particularly a long one, but it's just, I think the value of empathy in where we are today is really important, and we've really in a way underrated the power of empathy, but it could be a really valuable emotion and asset to try and make the world a little bit better at a time when it actually feels quite fraught and scary.